Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Podcast decides to give back to awards community by handing out awards of its own. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's right. We don't just receive awards, we want to give awards as well. So we are going to give some end-of-season awards to players, to games, to managers, to transfer moves, to strategies, to podcasts. All manner of things will receive awards. But because we still want hashtag clicks, downloads, listens, we will talk transfers. We'll save plenty of time at the back half of this to talk about how many Dortmund players is the right number of Dortmund players to sign. Don't worry, we'll get to that. We'll get to it with a full panel of experts. Hashtag quote experts, air quotes. Tim, you can find him on Twitter at Stillberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Paul, you can find him on Twitter at PoznanInMyPants. Hello, Poz.
Hello.
No, that's straight out.
No.
Nope, that's not on at all. Okay, there you go. And Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Clive is fresh off a 30-mile bike ride. He also built 2 schools for the blind. He planted some trees. I believe he may have scaled a mountain. So Clive is exhausted. He has expressed that to me, and we will try to take into account his exhaustion and giving him some time to refresh. Clive, is that okay?
That's good. If you see me, you'd probably say, why don't you do 60 miles? But hey, that's the way it
Couldn't
goes.
hurt. Look, it couldn't hurt. Hey, I had a donut for breakfast. It's all good. Okay, so we are going to hand out some awards for the season. It was maybe an underwhelming season, to say the least, and it feels a little weird looking back on it, I think you can say, because it just feels a million years ago. Now we have a new manager. We are in the midst of discussing transfers in the next season and World Cup, but I think it's always good to put a final period, a final point onto the end of the season, and so we'll do that with these awards. And the first one we want to talk about is your player of the season. So, Tim, I'll start with you. Who do you have as Arsenal's player of the season for the 2017-18 season?
I have, drumroll, no one.
No one. Oh, I love this. We're going abstract. We're thinking outside the box. You do not think there's a player of the season?
No, I don't. So I'm going to slightly change the question because,
of course, that's what
for me, player of the for me, player of the season means someone who's been consistently brilliant throughout the season. I'm thinking Robert Pires, 2002. I'm thinking Thierry Henry, pick a year. I'm thinking Patrick Vieira, pick a year. I'm thinking, Aaron Ramsey, 2013-14. That for me is a player of the season, someone who sets a high standard and keeps it throughout the whole season. There is not a single player in this Arsenal squad that has done that, in my opinion. I think you could make a very weak argument for Nacho Monreal because he's been consistently good. But that I don't think that's a good enough rationale.
If you're shooting for consistency, can it be Mustafi because he's been consistent?
Well, I suppose he's a type of player of the season. So for me, the much more interesting question, and I'm giving you a little sneak preview of something I've written for about 2.5 weeks' time, is the most improved player of the season. I think that's a much more interesting question because, frankly, nobody has been good throughout the season. Even Ramsey. Mm-hmm. If you say Ramsey, I wouldn't give you a massive argument against it, but I think there's a fair amount of recency bias in there. He played 36 games. Yeah. If we'd have done this in December, nobody would have said Ramsey.
Should I skip you for most improved player, by the way?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
He's really taken the wind out of not just that award, but really this whole thing with the awards.
So far, he's crossed 2 awards off as being irrelevant or unanswerable. Thank you for that, Tim.
He's undermined really all the awards, if you ask me.
So I think most improved player is a much more interesting question. I'd say Granit Xhaka. For that.
It's on the list. The list. I actually sent you a rundown this time. The one time I send you a rundown, it's on the list. So can we get to it? Is that okay? Do you mind?
Yeah. So I'll give you my reasons for Granit Xhaka later. But okay. Yeah, that's my short answer. I don't have a player of the season because I don't think anyone deserves it.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for getting this off to a flyer.
Eventually, everybody we know and love will die.
Yeah, the heat death of the universe is an inevitability. Paul. Who is your player of the season? Or if you prefer, just spit out some words that are unrelated to anything I've asked.
Yeah, listen, I just don't care who the best player of the year award is.
Just give me a player of the year. This is off the rails, and we're 4 minutes into it.
All right, well, Ramsey, he got better as the year went on. And out of the paltry offerings we had, I certainly get the what's the point of picking a best player of the year award. We shouldn't actually hand them a trophy, and we won't. But definitely Ramsey. I mean, he built as the year went on. I think Xhaka had way too long a period in the year where he wasn't good enough, and towards the end he was. But was he really tested? So I think he's a rival. Anyway, yeah. I won't ruin Clive's thunder, but I think the reasons why. Here's the other aspect of it. It might be really good timing because I think he's a player who's always felt overshadowed at Arsenal, underappreciated, etc., etc. You know, he had his blistering year, but somehow that through injury, not being able to follow through on it, that was kind of a one-off. And here we are coming up to a potential contract renewal, and it puts him in, assuming he's the guy we want to stick around and lead the team forward, which maybe half the population base, the Arsenal supporter base, think, and maybe half don't. We can talk about that a little further later on. Couldn't be better timing for him to get the appreciation and love. And I think he might have got goal of the season on the website, but certainly his goal got a lot of attention too. So
yeah, Clive, you've been getting a lot of kudos for your performances on the podcast so far. So can you please bring all your gravitas and organizational experience to the question of best player of the season?
Well, a little bit like Tim, I might just blow this podcast up. I think the way I quit. the way I look at player of the season, I tend to look at it as almost like a who's the most valuable player award. Who's the one that played the most? Who's the one that we find hardest to replace? And I'm afraid my player of the season would be Granit Xhaka. I think he's played in almost every game, if not every game. He was one of the few players that didn't get rested in in midweek games, some of the cup games. I think he's very valuable to how we played last season. So when I look at these awards, I look at them from a player's perspective, a teammate perspective, and a manager's perspective. And the manager obviously sees him as somebody very valuable and important because he kept picking him even when he wasn't playing very well. So I look at it that way, and I think he ended the season well, which sort of chops Tim's legs off, most improved. But and I think I just think when I look at our pattern of play, when our superstar number 11 wasn't always available, Xhaka was available and he took on extra responsibility and so did Aaron Ramsey when certain other players weren't available. So for me, it's Granit Xhaka.
Sure, and I don't have a problem with that. The only reason I couldn't pick Xhaka is because in the period where he really struggled, we really struggled. And unfortunately, that period may have cost us being able to be in a top 4 race. I think it is, and
it was quite a long period.
Yeah, well,
and funny enough, it was a period. It was a period when Jack came into the team and Ramsey got injured.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The reason it has to be Ramsey for me is just because, by your criteria, Clive, in terms of most valuable player, our worst period of the season was when Ramsey was out. And I think it's a difficult season to evaluate because there was so much change in the squad. I mean, I really enjoyed Mkhitaryan, Aubameyang, and I think Mkhitaryan, you could make a shout for player of the season in a sense because his performances in the Europa League really lifted us to a semifinal, and his absence from the team in the semifinal was arguably the difference between us maybe getting through it and not. So you could go with a lot of clever answers. I think we're good enough with the ones we picked. Let's stay with players and talk about, I don't want to say worst player, although I'm happy to say worst player. But let's say most disappointing player. I'll start. I think the worst player was Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, but I'll let you guys answer the question. Think about it. He played one game against Liverpool, was terrible, and moved there. Anyway, most disappointing player, Clive.
He was great this season.
Not for us. Who was your most disappointing player, Clive?
Oh, well, I might kill all your answers, right? So most disappointing player for me was, I don't want to say it, right? But
say it.
I can't.
Yeah, say it. Be controversial.
Well, the one that disappoints me the most is Mustafi. I got to say, and I'm not sure he's the worst player. I just feel his inconsistency was so stark, and at a time when he's one of those core players at a core age, I wanted to see him step up, and I felt on some occasions he found everywhere else to be apart from in the right place, and I find some of his low points so low they don't belong at a top 6 club. They don't belong at a top 10 club, and he needs to fix that. So for me, he's disappointing.
Yeah.
It's not all his fault. He was shoved around different partners, different formations. When it comes down to it, these are challenges that you face, and I felt he didn't step up to them.
It's a great shout. Paul, do you have anyone else you want to nominate?
Yes.
Please, who?
Also, I want to say, I want to rubbish Clive and your selection indirectly on Mustafi, because you both said he's inconsistent while saying he's terrible.
Well, I said he was consistent as a joke in the previous
really
answer.
Good. Yeah, but we do want to forget how good he was when he was good. Sometimes he was very good. Anyway, my most disappointing player. So I'm torn between
You have to pick one, Paul.
Kolasinac and Cech, and not because I dislike either of them or whatever, but Cech was okay at the start of the season and okay right at the very end, but as he came into his run for the clean sheets record, he tanked, and I think psychologically maybe the manager was right with his excuse for him, that it started playing on his mind simultaneously. Both his record was going down the tubes, while right in that time was Arsenal's worst performances defensively, and it was probably depressing the fuck out of him. But it was an important time for him and for us from a goalkeeping standpoint within the season, and then putting us in the situation of next year, because I still rate him. That's why I find it particularly disappointing.
Yeah.
And Kolasinac started like a train, and then, was he injured? Was he this? Was he that? I don't know what the fuck was going on with him. I think he had like one good game by the end of the kind of final 2/3 of the season, maybe a couple.
Yeah.
So probably Kolasinac, because at least Peter Cech gave us something for significant portions of the season, even if he leaves more questions than answers.
Well, it's easy to look okay when Ospina is the other option in goal. I think you're right. On another team with a more competent backup, it's possible Cech would have lost his position. Tim, who disappointed you the most in the season apart from me on this podcast?
I've got two short answers for completely different reasons. Jack Wilshere, because he played a lot of games and stayed fit, and it's nearly June, and I don't really care whether he goes or stays, and that might not be his fault. That might just be his body has kind of given up. But if you'd have told me in August that Jack Wilshere was going to play, I don't know the exact number, close to 40 games, and I'd be a bit indifferent to him staying, then I'd have classed that as a disappointment. My other disappointment, not because I think he played badly, but because I think maybe again he under-delivered on his talent, is Mesut Ozil. I think Mesut Ozil had a 7 out of 10 season, and he's a 9 out of 10 player. And he has a completely free role, so he doesn't get the, Arsenal's a bit anarchic, it's a bit of tactical chaos. Mesut Ozil is the one player that doesn't get to use that excuse. He has a completely free role, and I thought he was completely 7 out of 10. Even when we signed a striker like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and we got that extra attacking support in Mkhitaryan, I still thought for his level of ability, I thought he still under-delivered, and I found that quite disappointing.
And Tim, he was actually really good in the first, you might say, half of the season. I mean, I was thinking, this guy has really taken a step
October to December, up until that goal against Liverpool, where you think, here we go. He's puts 3-2 up at home to Liverpool, where he's made and finished the goal, and you think, here we go. This is Ozil now. And then he signs the contract, and then he just kind of melts away for the rest of the season. And he
was nursed, Tim, as well. He was nursed through periods, rested through periods, given weeks off, brought back for key moments, and then under-delivered.
The group stage of the Europa League.
Some of these players were nursed, and I look at the ones that weren't nursed, right? And that's where I made my decisions. Ramsey was nursed.
Maybe he was injured.
Nursed.
But you know what, guys? I mean, if you go back to Twitter and you look through people's timelines from maybe August, September, October, there were a lot of, we need to re-sign Alexis and Ozil can fuck off people out there. I mean, he really started indifferently at the beginning of the season, and maybe because he sensed that there weren't going to be a lot of bidders out there to give him a huge contract, or maybe that's too cynical. Maybe he just switched on, but he really got the bit between his teeth as the season wore on, and he got the contract, and he didn't kick on. And I think the way you have to evaluate a player is not according to every other player. It's the level of performance that player is capable of, right? So if you're LeBron James and you're playing basketball, you have to be evaluated at the level of one of the best in the game. If you're Mesut Ozil, you have to be evaluated as one of the best number 10s in the game. And I think it's certainly fair to say that by those standards, and you said this more eloquently than I currently am, Tim, he did not live up to the kind of performances he is capable of, and indeed that we compensated him for. Yeah,
which is not to say he's bad or played bad.
No, of course not.
He didn't, but and I think he's done this fairly consistently at Arsenal. I still think there is another 10% in Mesut Ozil that we haven't seen on a regular basis.
For his contract.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
Quickly? I think
why not?
It's really interesting, and Tim, the way you described that was fantastic, right? And two players that hadn't crossed my mind, and but what it does show you is how we walk into a room and we judge players, and what structures and how we interpret player performance, right? And there are going to be people listening to this, and they're going to be raging, they're going to be agreeing, and that's the beauty of it all. The structures by which you interpret a player is normally based on your experience and exposure to football and what your personal standards are. And Tim, everybody was given a great explanation. And actually, now I'm thinking about it on Ozil, that is a great shout. And if we're serious about going somewhere as a club and we've invested in this guy and made him a key player, he really has not showed up at all.
Certainly not at that level, yeah. And look, I would say still that the right answer to this question is Mustafi, especially considering no matter how much we want to be critical of Ozil, goal scoring wasn't what cost us our season. It was goal allowing, especially away. And Ozil was protected in a lot of away games, didn't even play a lot of the away games up north. I think you could make an argument if I was going to nominate someone that just hadn't been nominated, I might say Danny Welbeck, reaching a critical period in his Arsenal career, a stay or go kind of moment in terms of whether he's going to be offered a contract or be sold. He did get a lot of chances to play. He went through a really, really poor period where he became a meme, essentially, for not being able to kick a ball or stand up. Now, I know he had a couple really good performances late in the season. I believe in the Europa League is when they came, where he did some incredible stuff. But overall, I thought it was a pretty indifferent season for him. There's always been this, if he could add finishing, he'd be a star player, and he just doesn't seem like he's ever going to quite put it all together. And that may mean that he's off this summer, so he's someone who maybe could be on that list. Let's stick with the player questions just real quick. Tim, I'm really curious to get your answer on this one, actually, because I just have no idea which way you're going to go with it, so I think it'd be fascinating. Who would you say was your most improved player?
Well, do you know what? Because I've got an article coming out on him in 2 weeks, I will park Granit Xhaka.
Oh, okay, cool. I like this. This way you get 2 bites of the apple.
And ruin my pick. Thanks.
And so someone else can say Granit Xhaka if they want, because I think that's the correct answer. So I'll go with someone else. And I'll say Callum Chambers. I think in the last 2 to 3 months of the season, so the first half of the season, I was kind of looking at Chambers. He was getting plenty of Europa League games, and I was thinking, yeah, this still looks like a Middlesbrough centre-back to me. But I really, really think towards the end of the season, when we kind of, the emphasis swapped and it became about Premier League games, and the Europa League was when Koscielny played, and maybe those games are very different, and actually Chambers got regular Premier League football. I thought Callum Chambers improved massively. And even when, we went to Old Trafford and he played alongside Mavropanos and he was the senior partner, I thought he played that role really, really well as well. I think he looked like, when a player looks a couple of inches taller because they kind of think, right, I've got to be the boss today. And, Per Mertesacker stopped playing after January. I'm not sure he, other than that kind of valedictory sub-appearance against Burnley, I don't think he played again after January. So Chambers played, and he didn't necessarily, he either played instead of Koscielny, so quite often he was quite a senior player, in that back four, and I thought he took to it really, really well. And I mentally I'd kind of started to let him go a little bit, but I think the last couple of months of the season he really, really kicked on, and I started to think to myself, he should be playing instead of Mustafi. He should be in on merit at the moment, and I'd be really interested to see and hope to see that continue next season.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly good shot. Now, and the interesting thing there, Tim, is I think it's fair to say he might be the most improved. The question is he improved enough to be someone we can depend on? And I think that's an open question. I don't know that is yet the case. Paul, you want to pick
more
Granit
time,
Xhaka? Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of pickings because you actually have to find somebody who's improved in the team. So I'm going to go with if we put ourselves back at the start of the summer, you had Ainsley Maitland-Niles and you had Reece Nelson, and all the excitement was about Reece Nelson. And yeah, there was a reasonable amount of interest in Maitland-Niles, but we'd seen him kind of the season before, and people weren't that excited about him. Some were. Most thought he had potential. He'd come off a good summer youth tournament where they won the World Cup, I think. But you compare the two trajectories of the guys, and it shows you just can't tell. And Ainsley Maitland-Niles proved everything in terms of ability. He has a whole chunk to prove in terms of, has he got the right mentality, focus? Can he do it consistently? As a footballer, is he a serious footballer week in, week out? So that's all ahead of him. But he showed throughout the season that he's not just a prospect.
No, I think that's a great call.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting, Paul? You said something, though, that really struck a chord with me, which is very, very rare. You said...
Yeah, very.
that...
Tell me, hang on, I got a pen. Yep.
Okay, that no one really was improved. And you said it, and it's so profound in a way, because the way teams go from being good to being contenders for a league, or going up a tier in the league, is the players they have produce 10%, 15%, 20% better performances than they had the season before. And you need organic improvement, not just transfer improvement, but organic improvement within your team to get better. And across the board, we didn't get it. We didn't get a leap year from Ozil. We didn't get a leap forward from Xhaka. We didn't get a leap forward from enough players, or really any players, to carry us. And I think that is a really important point.
The only good news is the upside this team has is massive with the manager who starts to just get them back to not so much the greater than the sum of their parts, but equal to the sum of their parts is a massive jump up.
Yes, I agree. But the one other thing that I think your point highlights is why age profiles are important to look at, because the likelihood that 23-year-old teams are going to step forward massively from season to season is very high. 23-year-olds improve. I mean, they don't all do that, but there's a chance. When you have a team full of 27, 28, 29-year-olds, you're pretty confident in the level they're going to give you. So I think that's something to keep an eye out for. Clive, who is the most improved player for you?
I would have said Maitland-Niles. So, and I think I would have said him, but obviously I'll try to say something slightly different. I think the legacy of these young players will be felt in the next couple of years. There's about 3 or 4 that I think we're going to really see. That could easily go 5 or 6. In the next 2 to 3 years, I think they're going to be names we're all going to recognise. So we'll wait and see what happens there. Maitland-Niles is the top of that list for me. But a player that I think maybe really suffered from, much like Chambers, suffered from indifferent reviews. But when he signed a new contract this year, a lot of people were happy and said it was deserved. So just to give a different name, I would say El Neni has improved a lot this year. I think he has won a lot of people over. People know what he is. They're far more accepting of him. They know he's a game, hard-working all-rounder that's really tried to improve some of the positive sides of his game, speed up his pass, become more progressive, be less safe. He looks like he's very popular within the dressing room. He got his new squad number. He got his new contract. And there was no uproar when it happened. Right, so I think that's a positive sign. I don't think people have been so happy if he got a new contract at the start of the season. So I think he's really proved people wrong. Did all the ugly away trips in Europe, performed to his maximum level every single time. He was dropped for like 3-4 weeks and came in and straight away 7 out of 10 performance, which always tells me that he trains really hard off the pitch. So for me, he got injured at an unfortunate time. I think we could have done with him in the last few weeks. And I hope he's going to have a good World Cup. I think for me, outside of Maitland-Niles, I'd go El Nini.
Interesting.
And could I?
Yeah.
And just a quick tag on. He added I think it's a good pick. He added dimension, at least one dimension to his game in terms of being able to drop in between the centre backs, which we saw him centre backing at the start of the season, and Wenger said, "Nah, he won't be doing that in the season proper." But it actually came in handy as he dropped in between the centre backs, and when you look at how Emery sometimes plays with his guys, that can be quite handy. So he'll often have a central midfielder who will fall back between the two centre backs and play the ball out from there, etc. So
the moment for me where he really kind of became a guy I had to look at differently, I think it was in the CSKA game in Moscow where we were kind of on the ropes a little, and Jack had been playing more forward, and he had kind of dropped in with the back three, or to make a back three, and then we pulled Jack off, and he moved up. You know what I mean? We took Jack off the pitch, and we jacked off. Why can't I stop saying masturbation? We moved him off the pitch, and he had, I think, arguably the assist of the season. You remember that? He had a nifty little collection in midfield, drove forward, and I can't remember who he sent in behind the back four. Welbeck, ironically. And that really made me look at him a little bit differently in that moment, because he really flashed some creative ability as well. The interesting thing is I don't see it with Xhaka, Tim, only because I think he improved tremendously over the course of the season to a level that, ironically, I think he was at the end of last season as well. He
started from a low bar.
Yes, exactly. My most improved of the season, and I think it's fairly obvious, I think it has to be Aaron Ramsey, only in the sense that we know he has it in him, but he was not playing at that level. And his output this season is much more consistent with the kind of guy we think he can be, and one of the reasons we need to keep him. I think if he had put in this season like the one before, I don't know that anybody would be worried about losing him. So, for me, the improvement isn't... He improved to a level we thought he had, but he got there. So I think that's important. Okay, so let's get to...
Can I just say something on Ramsey?
Fine, yes.
Well, he was one of those that was nursed and that was allowed to play every 7 to 10 days, right, for big games. So he was able to have maximum outputs. And sometimes you've got to look at the ones that we could not afford to rest to keep the other parts of the season going, right? So I think players like Ramsey and Ozil, yes, we know they're important, and yes, no doubt they can reach a really high quality level, but we really looked after them. And if we're looking for future pillars in our team, I'm afraid we need players who can play 3 times in 8 days. So we have to watch
Ozil should be able to, Clive. I think with Ramsey, at least the defense is, if you're going to plump down a lot of money on Ramsey, you just know you've got a guy who's injury prone and has to be managed. So that's a question for a higher pay grade than me, certainly. But I think you can be more critical of nursing Ozil than nursing an injury prone Ramsey, if that makes sense.
I also think Xhaka is a big part of the reason that Ramsey played so well. It's not a coincidence to me that Ramsey's best seasons have come alongside Arteta when he played pretty much every game. And this season, did Ramsey play with another central midfielder other than Xhaka? I think Xhaka
started every single league game, didn't he?
Yeah. So Xhaka must have started nearly every game Ramsey started. I don't think it's a coincidence that with like a deep-lying playmaker, Ramsey pulls out his probably second best season in an Arsenal shirt.
Let's whip through these a little bit more, Clive. Your highest moment, best game, and lowest moment, worst game of the season.
Highest moment was Mesut Ozil's third goal versus Liverpool. Just that moment when he bounced it over the keeper into the ground.
Good shot.
I mean, I just could not believe it. I think I mentioned before that I spoke to Tim at half-time, rubbish the club, wanted to burn the ground down, never thought we'd ever see anything happen again. The team were broken, they weren't even talking to each other. It was absolutely a low moment. I could have walked out. did not see that 6-minute period coming in any which way or form, and Ozil crowned that off. And that's probably, from a live game perspective, that was probably my favourite live game as well. So highest game and highest moment was the Liverpool game.
What about low?
Low, there's so many lows, right? Low, funny enough, low was probably Atletico Madrid when we conceded the away goal. I know that seems pretty obvious, but it was beyond stupid, and they weren't even trying to score. And the price we paid for lack of concentration manifests itself in us going out. So at the time, I was trying to be positive, but looking back historically, that was the lowest moment.
I think that's a great shout, too. You know why, Clive? Because I think one of the things that can make for a really low moment is when you are very high emotionally already, and then you sink very far from where you were. So I think there was a lot of excitement about how we were playing, the dominance we had, the 11 versus 10 men. We had the 1-0. If we could get out of Dodge with that, we felt we were going to go to the Europa League final. It's happening. We're going to lift a European Cup. And then that goal suddenly immediately shifted the feeling to we're going to crash out. We're not going to get the result in Madrid. And so it was just the contrast was as stark as can be. Paul, for you, highest moment, best game, lowest moment, worst game?
So highest moment, best game would be our Spurs victory 2-0 at home. Tactically, we took them to the cleaners.
Yeah.
It was competent. And consequently, although we just gotten beaten by City, we weren't yet terrible. We'd recently beaten Everton 5-2. We'd just beaten Swansea. We went on to beat Burnley away from home. We beat Huddersfield 5-0 next. So it was a really good run, kind of a short run, but a moment at which we thought, hey, we're tactical, we're flexible, we're competent. We just stuffed those bastards. So that was the high point. The low point, close to Clive's, which was not so much the away goal, but fucking Griezmann's celebration. That fucking thing.
The Fortnite celebration? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. What if that's a Fortnite?
It's from a video game.
I was like, I'm concerned because sometimes you hear these tragic stories about how, it's a celebration of his grandmother who was a ballerina or something and died tragically or something. I don't know what the fucking thing was. Yeah.
Talk to me after the pod offline. I don't want to waste airtime on it, but talk to me after the pod about a new section called "Old Man Yells at Cloud." I want to try that.
Right.
Try that. Okay.
Anyway, what a wanker.
Yeah, agreed. Tim, yours?
Okay, so best game, highest moment would be the last home game of the season, the Burnley game. Won't go into it too much because we did an entire podcast on it. But
should listen to it. It's excellent.
I just love the
entire podcast on every game.
Well, but this time we did like a whole podcast on like the atmosphere and the feel of that day, and it was I still think the best home game I've been to at the Emirates, and I'm just and Paul, you made this point brilliantly on that podcast. That even though we'd had the shit season, we hadn't got to the Europa League final, Arsene still got that absolutely unadulterated kind of love and respect, and I'm glad he got to see that even at like a really low moment. So that's my best game, highest moment, and we played brilliantly and won 5-0. Worst game, lowest moment, without doubt, the Carabao Cup final against Manchester City, because I had low expectations and somehow Arsenal still managed to really disappoint me. I was thinking like a regulation 3-1 defeat would, that's kind of what, a bit like the game at the Etihad in November. That's kind of what I was expecting. Like, we'll put a fight up, but we'll probably lose because they're much better than us. And we didn't really put a fight up. And actually, I didn't think Man City were that good at all. And, watching thousands and thousands of people leave a cup final. I know it's only the Carabao Cup final, but leaving a cup final at Wembley with 25 minutes to go, and usually that idea would fill me with rage, and I was looking at them and thinking, you're the smart people, I'm the stupid one that's going to stay till the final whistle. And like having really low expectations and somehow still being disappointed, and coming out thinking, man, Arsene, like cup finals were all you had left. Like all you had left for the last few years was like pulling a rabbit out of the hat at Wembley, and now your players just don't look like they're listening to you even for a game like this. That was a real low.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have come up with great ones, and now, oh man, I'm jealous because I got to come up with something else, and I'm not really sure where to go with that. But I think highest moment is probably, I mean, the Burnley game was really interesting because emotionally it was very high, but it had nothing to do with the football for me, so I don't know if that qualifies. I think it has to be the Spurs game for me. I can't really escape that. I'm going to give you a weird low moment. Because I had two. One of them is arguably the very first Liverpool game, because there is nothing worse than being slapped in the face in the beginning of the season with the idea that you might just not be very good. You know, because you're at that point in the season where hope springs eternal, and you're like, maybe we're going to go on a big run. Maybe we're going to win the league. Who knows? You've all this crazy romantic optimism in you, and then you come up against Liverpool and you just look totally out of their league. I mean, that was a disastrous, embarrassing performance. You guys remember how bad that was, right? I know it's a long time ago. And immediately, before the season's even started, you're like, we're just not very good. And that's a terrible thing to have to think in August and September, you know. But another sneaky shout might be, remember the Bournemouth loss in January? So I think we were touching distance to being a top 4 team at that point. We're still talking about we can make top 4, and we're getting Aubameyang, we got Mkhitaryan, and you know we're looking like maybe the team's going to come together and be of use. And then we go and we lose away at Bournemouth, and then subsequently draw Chelsea, draw West Brom, and you know top 4 at that point kind of looked gone. So I just remember hope was kind of coming back to us in that moment with Aubameyang coming in and Mkhitaryan's there. And, you know, we had just, I think, trounced someone 4-1. Maybe it was Palace or something. And then we had that dump. We took that dump at Bournemouth, and that was really the end of it. So those are some of my choices. Real quick, I was going to do best goal, but is anybody going to pick anything other than that Ramsey sort of flicked volley? You know the one I'm talking about?
I was going to say maybe Ozil against Newcastle, but I don't have
that's
a
my
lot
pick.
more to say about that.
I mean, it was Zidane-esque, wasn't it, in terms of quality?
Yeah, but the Ramsey one is sensational, right? I mean, Clive, you have one other than those?
Yeah, I like the Everton away goals. I think Lacazette scored a nice goal against Everton on the break. I thought it was a nice team goal. I thought Lacazette's goal, I think, was the game. Early goal, shocked me against Bournemouth or Swansea. Can't remember which one. Might have been Swansea. Might have been Bournemouth, actually. But I picked the games I see live, and he sort of put it in the top corner in the home game there, and I thought it was nice. The Ramsey one obviously stands out, right? You can't deny as a gasp moment.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the gasp moment of the season. Really.
It happened in like slow motion too. You can see it coming. It was crazy. Okay, we don't need to spend a lot of time on best goal. So let's do this real quick. I got a couple things. So first of all, overall letter grade for the season. Taking everything into account. Don't break it out by cups, just overall. So Clive, what's your overall, American style plus minuses, if you want, letter grade for this season?
It's a C plus for me, just about, and or even a C. I think where we've ended up is more exciting. The last sort of month has been more exciting, but I really felt this year we had a big squad. We could play 2 teams in 2 different competitions. We could rest players, yet we didn't win in the away game until the very last moment. And I think we've always bemoaned the injuries and the exhaustion and our inability to manage games in close succession. But that wasn't the case this year, and I really hope for a bit more consistency in the league and a bit more resilience, and I just didn't see it. I didn't see any lessons being learned. So for me, it's a C. I say C plus because I'm a fan, but if I listen to what I just said, it sounds like a C minus, right? So,
Paul, what about you?
Yeah, well, Clive's certainly doing American-style grading where they hand out feckin' grades for just showing up.
Yeah, he's grading on a curve. Yeah, I'm used to that. We did that.
I'll give you a European grade for that season. That's a fucking F. I mean, if that isn't measured, I mean, that's... I don't want to be too harsh on anybody, but that was clearly Arsenal's worst season. It's the first time the team really seemed to just kind of give up and never come back. And I don't mean it individually they gave up, or as a team they got together and willfully gave up. It just, the air went out of the balloon and kept going out and kept going out. So I'm giving it.
Yeah.
I mean, I love these guys.
No, I get it.
I love Arsenal.
You don't have to justify that. We finished sixth.
No.
We lost to Forest in the FA Cup. Yeah.
You know how our listeners can be, Elliot. Well, I love everybody.
I do
individually and as a team. I give them all A pluses, but on the season an F.
Yeah. Tim, where do you come out on that?
Oh yeah, they definitely get an F. They failed in every competition. There was at least one big disappointment in every competition. They were out of the reckoning for top four before February. And, we signed two brilliant players in January and wasted them, basically, at least in the short term. It was a failure by every measure.
Cool. I'll give it like a D minus. We did beat Chelsea in a cup semifinal. We made it to a cup final. We made it to a European semifinal, admittedly beating, teams that we should beat, but we did it. FA Cup is an F minus, and the league is a solid F. It's as bad as we realistically can do. So I think it all comes out to about a D minus, F plus. I've always thought F plus is a funny grade. So let's give it an F.
I think in a strange way, this has been not the groundhog season. It's been,
that's true.
From a football perspective, it's been very average. But actually, it's been sparked with massive interest, once in a generation type moments, and we've got the future that none of us can really predict, right? So I look at the whole thing. That's why I gave it in the C range, but trying to remember Bournemouth away and Swansea away and Brighton away. To be
fair to you, Clive, we're in 4 competitions, okay? And 2 of them, we made the final and the semi-final, and the other 2, we completely shit the bed. So, I mean, depending on how you want to weight Europa and Carabao, I mean, those competitions, to your point, I mean, Carabao had us interested until February, Europa had us interested all the way into May. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point.
It's just interesting, right?
Yeah, can I just make a point, because I don't want to be the bad guy here. I'd like that to be Tim. I gave all the players individually and the manager A pluses on this.
All right, moving on. So, and then this is kind of where we'll.
Did he really interrupt me to say that?
Clive,
I mean, I've
Clive,
taken some low blows.
Is it the worst? Is it the worst
Clive,
interruption he's done?
What you like out there.
I don't care. I'll tell you what. It's been the not groundhog season, and for that, I couldn't give it an F, because it's the gateway to the future, right? So, I'm in a C range from a
basically
positivity.
It was so bad it's forced change.
Yes, exactly. F for forced change.
Yeah, it gets an F for forced removal of the manager. Okay, we're going to do one last thing, and then we're really going to get into transfers now with our last 20 minutes or so that we can get some listens to this. And I'm not sure it warrants them at this point. But so the player you're most excited for next season, and Clive, I think there are a lot of players in this team that have underperformed, and that's on them, but there are probably some players in this team that have underperformed by virtue of the system or the coaching or just not being given a chance. Who's the player that you are most excited to see with a new manager, new system?
Okay, I could pick a few, right? But I'm going to pick one that I think is really obvious. And if we look at the end of season, I think he's really got some potential to be a leading player in the league, and that's Aubameyang. Right? I think he has got some amazing skill sets that's going to really unlock this team. But it is dependent on how we use him, right? And I think that's the unknown. If you look at his movement in the box, it's Gary Lineker-esque. He moves all the time. He sprints to the ball. He's always he leaves space to run into. He leaves running lines so you can pass to him. He's very clever. He has double movements. And if you press him up high, he's going to kill you in behind, right? He times his runs. And so I think he's got some potential. And also, I just like his demeanour on the pitch. I think he looks like he wants to be there. I know it helps when he looks at his cash point balance, right? But it probably looks pretty good. I don't think we're paying him, a couple of tracksuits to be there. So yeah, I think there's that to look for. But I just enjoy his demeanour, and I think he's a player that could really transmit himself to the crowd and lift the crowd in the stadium. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
It's a great call because he is one of the great players in Europe. He's a player I was desperate to see at Arsenal for a long time. I actually wish we had done it in the summer and not waited till January. But to your point, he played mostly meaningless games since he arrived. He played only in the league, and the top four race was really pretty much over when he got in there. So to see him when it still matters is going to be really exciting. Paul, how about you?
Yeah. So I got two in mind. To be excited about them next year. Aubameyang would have been a great pick, but I'm going to go with one of two younger players. I'll only mention one. Bellerin. He's Spanish, so is Unai Emery. He's been itching maybe to make a move because I think he wants to learn under some really good coaching, and Emery really uses his fullbacks to press on, to bring width, etc. So I think he's going to learn to defend. He's going to be drilled. He's going to be trained. So I think we'll get the most out of him. He should be on the same wavelength. Working under Emery should have been the reason he was looking to get a move if he was in previous summers. So I think we'll have a great opportunity to see his upside over the next year or so.
That would be great because it's massive.
Yeah. And he's instrumental in tying together defence, midfield, and attack, and getting that balance right. It's been a long time since our full-backs, which are really the balancing act. You know, how do you get overexposed in midfield? It's not just the DM, right? It's having two Spanish full-backs. If Monreal's starting on one side and Bellerin on the other, and we get in, just taking that aspect of it, being on the same wavelength as Emery might really accelerate our transition to being a coherent team in transitions.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. Tim, who's most exciting for you to see with a new voice in his head on the training pitch?
For me, Xhaka.
There are other players in the team. You can pick literally any of the players in this team.
Well, I've actually avoided talking about him since the first question, but the things I really like about Xhaka, I think he's really worked hard on correcting some of his biggest flaws. So, and what's really interesting is I think it's taken outside of the Arsenal fan base, people haven't quite realised yet. People would still say, "Oh, he gets sent off all the time," and he hasn't been sent off in nearly 2 years. And but that thing he used to do where he just used to swipe people's legs, he stopped doing that ages ago. But it takes a long time for a reputation to shift, and I think he stopped putting himself in positions where his lack of speed over the ground gets exposed. I think he's wised up to that, and his positioning's much better. He's much better at jockeying players and at just thinking, do you know what? I'm not going to charge up the pitch because I can't get back, so I'm just going to sit here. And that to me, what I really like and I'm enthused about by Xhaka is I think he's very intelligent, and I think he's got brains and balls, basically, which is something I really thought, even when he was playing miserably when he was younger, I really saw in Aaron Ramsey. I was like, no, this guy, he wants to learn, and he's not affected by what people say. And I think Xhaka's like that. I really think Xhaka is like a future leader of this team, and he's in a very interesting age bracket that not many of our squad are in, where most of our squad either seem to be like 29 to 33 or 18 to 22.
It's very weird.
There's not a lot in that like mid-20s range. And I think Xhaka's a really interesting player for Arsenal. And
would you make him captain, Tim?
I wouldn't object if that happened. I could see him taking that kind of role.
I think a bit too soon, though, isn't it, Tim? Just like a year or so.
Wouldn't it be refreshing, you guys, though, to have a captain who played 38 league games instead of 0?
Yeah, and that's important, because look at Arsenal's midfield over the last 6 to 7 years. It's been time and time again it gets decimated by injury, and Xhaka is or has been to this point very reliable. I just really see him as someone who looks to me like he wants to step up into that leadership role, and I'm really interested to see him next season. And I still think he gets quite a rough deal off of, shall we say, the wider public, and part of that's natural. It's going to take time for like those reputations to shift. But I really like him. I think he's got a good head on him.
You've also
What's
just
delicious
totally
about him is that the
everybody
pundits
talk.
have utterly written him off, like utterly.
Yeah.
His reputation out there is that he's totally shit.
Clive.
Yeah, well, people don't understand the player, right? That's the thing. The way he walked in the door, people wanted him to be something that he's not. So he spent a couple of years either we don't know how to work him out, and the manager doesn't know how to work him out. But to me, it's quite obvious what he is. He's a deep line playmaker, and he'd be better with two people near him. And if we get that sort of V in midfield and him at the base, his role is self-explanatory, and that's what he is. But don't expect him to be heading things under his own crossbar, right? Because that's not what he is. So we need to make sure he's surrounded appropriately, and when he is, he'll drive the car, he'll direct the team, and that's what's happened the last 3 months, and people are starting to change their opinion on him.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think he is a player who will benefit also from potentially us getting in another midfielder or maybe changing our shape a little bit. I'm going to pick a player just really quickly that I don't think anybody would expect me to pick, so I think this will be interesting for people. I'm going to say Alex Iwobi. Emre has a reputation for being good with young talent. I think Iwobi is immensely talented. He has suffered from being played on the right, where he didn't thrive as an inside forward, that I don't think he was ready for.
2 M's, talented. Okay,
yeah. He is someone who has underperformed badly from what I think he can do, but has not necessarily been put in position to do well. And I thought towards the end of the season, when he got to play a little deeper, more like a midfielder, he actually thrived. He did really well. He had some really good performances. And so I'll be curious to see how Emre puts him into the side when he plays him, how he manages his time so he's not just playing too much or more than he's ready for, and gives him the opportunity to thrive, because there is a very talented player in there, and this really is a crucial period for him in terms of determining whether he's going to make it and really become someone important for Arsenal or not live up to his capabilities. So we will see. Let's talk departures, and I think that there are going to be some interesting choices made about who stays and who goes. So, Tim, for you, who are the players you expect, if any, to leave this summer? Now, let's just stop for a second. We don't have to mention Jenkinson. We don't have to mention Lucas Perez if you think he's going. You don't have to mention Joel Campbell. I'm talking about players that were part of the squad this season that you expect to leave this summer.
I think Jack Wilshere. I think he would have signed a contract if he was going to by now. And he's doing that like teenage girl thing on social media where he's just like, dropping. He really wants like, "You okay, hun?" Responses to what he's posting, and he's taken Arsenal out of his social media profile, bios and stuff like that. Like it's So I expect him to go. I'm really interested to see what happens with Danny Welbeck, because that's one that's not been spoken about, and he's going off to the World Cup, and that will really, really just come down, I think, to does Unai Emery like or rate him, and does that relationship work? And I really don't know what the answer to that is. I think if we still had Arsene Wenger, we'd probably offer Welbeck a contract but not push too hard on it. I've got no idea what Emery's going to do with that. So I think Wilshere definitely. I think there's a question mark over Welbeck, and I'll be fascinated to see the answer to it.
So just those two?
Yeah, maybe a couple of others, but I'll let my esteemed colleague talk about the tragedy of losing David Ospina.
Yeah, fair enough. Clive, let's jump over to you for a second. Who do you think's going this summer?
I don't know. I don't know what I would do.
That's content for you.
I don't know.
No, it's
none of us know, Clive. None of us.
Yeah, because I would do a lot different, and what I would, what I would do.
Who do you hope goes this summer?
I don't hope that anyone goes really, but I could see. I think there could be a problem with somebody that we really like. I'm going to give you 2 names, and not because I want them to go. It's just that it depends on what the manager decides to do from a playing style perspective and where he wants his players to go versus marketable value. And there's 2 players that I think are really good players, and I really mean that when I say it, and I really like them. I don't always like how they play, but I like them, in Lacazette and Ramsey. But I think they're just as good as they are. They can be a problem. But that is dependent on how the manager plays, and I just don't know how he's going to play. Right, so, and I'm saying those two names based on the fact that I'm taking a punt that we need to raise some money to really build a squad. And I'm not thinking we got 50 million quid, and I know about amortization and all the rest of it, but I think somebody's could potentially go that we don't want to go. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm putting a guess on one of those two. But the rest of the dead wood, come on, we can name them all.
No,
right?
of course, yeah. Ospina's gone, and Joel Campbell's gone. Jenkins. We don't.
Yeah, let's not insult the listeners' intelligence. I'll just give a couple of names there to get people to think. But right now, we've not seen a friendly, so I don't know how we're going to set up. I don't know his formations. I don't know his criteria for players in certain areas. So I'm really speculating there.
Yeah, Paul, do you have any concrete evidence from your inside contacts telling us who's going to go this summer?
Oh, no.
Okay, who do you think's going?
Look, my answer is really about not getting outmaneuvered by Clive, who hopes none of them are going. God, he really knows how to play this crowd, doesn't he?
I happen to love our listeners, and I don't think we're trying to manipulate them at all. You're the one who has a lot of rehabilitating to do here, because you said F the listeners on the last podcast like 17 times. So
Wasn't that Clive? No. Anyway,
pretty sure it wasn't. Yeah.
I think they should all get new contracts. That's what I think.
Okay. Anyone you think won't, though?
So I think Welbeck has a really good chance of not going, because Emery likes a front line who can press, and Danny does a lot of work rate, and he's not worth that much to sell. And he goes both ways, so I think he'd be very attracted to him. In terms of players who will go, I don't think Mustafi will go. I think he will get a chance to be rehabilitated with the new line. I think Chambers might, though, because we got Chambers and Holding. And I think Chambers would be the one if you needed to generate some dollars. And we got the young chap coming in, and maybe Socrates too as well. So I think that's a good shout.
That's a good shout, Paul. Chambers, that's a good shout.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like him. I just, the manager's got to or the coach has got to make a decision.
Any coach who listens to this podcast is going to have heard Tim say he was one of the most improved this season. So
but you know what? And the boy needs to play, because he went to Middlesbrough for a year. He's come into a bit part year, ended the year quite strong. That is prime time 25 million to somewhere like Crystal Palace.
That is a fair point.
Is prime time,
but
that's how it goes, right? And you got to say to yourself, is he going to take us to the promised land? Really good player, and he's got lots of growth time in him. But somebody's got to go. Do you see what I mean? Okay. That's a similar sort of criteria.
Let me just throw a little cold water.
We can't sell Mustafi, not without bringing in two senior centre backs, and even that's only 3 senior centre backs.
There is a lot of smoke now, or at least discussion of Mustafi possibly leaving this summer. And I think even if we get Socrates and one more experienced centre back, you're looking at Socrates, other new guy, so 2 guys that have never played in the Premier League, that have never played together, Chambers and Holding, if you sell Mustafi, and Mavropanos, who I don't think we can definitively say he's ready. So that's a really dicey position to be in. Now, if you're going to keep Mustafi and get rid of Chambers, again, you're still putting all your faith in guys you've never seen play in the Premier League and have never played for Arsenal before. I just think we put ourselves in a very precarious position. We're already in a precarious position with our center backs, and so if Mustafi goes, it'll be interesting. I mean, no one's saying Ramsey. Are we all of the opinion that Ramsey is going to re-sign?
I'm not sure.
Didn't I say Ramsey? I thought I did.
Sorry, you did say Ramsey. Yes, but
again, it all depends on. He said some things that he's very excited to come back, and everyone, the players, must be excited to come back to a completely different environment, new coaches. But in the end, he needs to sign the contract that's on the table, and I think I would offer him. I think he's £160 grand a week type player. If you want to go north of 200, I don't see it.
Doesn't it also depend what we can get for him, though?
Record.
Right. I mean, doesn't it also depend what we can get? I mean, if someone says we'll pay you $25 million for him, you can't even really entertain that.
Yeah. So okay. So you guys that scour the net like me, what sort of gossip have you seen about Aaron Ramsey going?
Nothing.
What sort of clubs are interested? So are we back into nightclub quarter-2 players again? Are we talking about that? I mean, sometimes we build these players up, right? But the market tells you what they are. So let's see how that market develops for him, and if there is one for him, right, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I don't think the word's hit the street yet because we're not hearing nothing. So as far as I think personally, I think potentially he will stay, and that's why there's been no gossip. So we'll see.
Well, and there's no World Cup for him, so it's certainly something that can get sorted out, earlier rather than later. Paul, let's put a final point on this.
Yeah, I think we'll want to keep him, but as Clive says, at a certain price, and beyond that, we'll be willing to let him go, because the manager must be looking at the midfield and saying, well, I'd actually like to make some changes. He might like Ramsey, he might like Xhaka, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes. It doesn't mean he likes being stuck with Ramsey and Xhaka on a lot of money permanently without the ability to bring in somebody else. So I don't think they'll give away the farm to keep Ramsey, but he's obviously he's a great player in your team. You may want another option, and you may want some money and some flexibility, as opposed to making Ramsey the franchise player up there with Ozil on that kind of money.
Yeah, I think Clive has really sort of opened my eyes a little bit to the way I look at Ramsey, because I sort of just presume him to be this incredible, supremely talented, unique, elite central midfielder. But I think, Clive, you certainly pointed me in the direction of another way of viewing it, and certainly another way of viewing it in terms of his role at Arsenal.
Tim actually done me. He wrote an article last week, and he put a great line in there, and he said, like, if we were to sell Aaron Ramsey, would we buy the same type of player? And I don't think we would. I think we'd buy a player that could run with the ball, connect the ball, closer to Santi Cazorla in style, if you see what I mean, with maybe a bit more defensive nous, but somebody who would carry and connect to the top end, and that maybe tells you the problem that we have. And I think Tim called it beautifully.
Yeah, part of the problem with Ramsey too is if you said to me, Clive, give me a comparison player to Ramsey, who's another midfielder in world football right now that you think compares favorably to Ramsey, I struggle to think of a central midfielder with his traits. He is such an end product player, in a team that now actually has quite a bit of end product. As far as Danny Welbeck goes, you know what I think is going to be interesting? If Emre knows Lucas Perez from his La Liga days and rates him and likes his playing style, that could be the end for Welbeck. But if Perez is off, then I certainly think Welbeck, as Paul pointed out, could have a role in the pressing system. So that'll be it. So then let's finish with this. Lichtsteiner and Socrates, I just want to get each of your thoughts on it. So Tim, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the apparent transfer ban we have that prohibits us from buying players that are either in their 20s or not at Dortmund?
I mean, I think basically it looks to me like the strategy is, by hook or by crook, get back into the Champions League ASAP and rebuild from there. Because basically we've kind of got an age profile where the squad needs rebuilding, but that's very difficult to do when you're about to go into your second season in the Europa League. So it looks to me like what they've done is they've gone, right, we've got quite a lot of good attackers who are like 29, so we're going to get another 2 to 3 like top level seasons out of them. Let's try and go with that a little bit. We need a bit more experience at the back without Mertesacker, without Koscielny, and basically by any means possible, whether it's through the Europa League or getting back into the top 4, let's just buy experience for now that we can get done quickly before the World Cup. We don't really have to compete for that are fairly simple signings to do. Let's get back in there, and hopefully in 2 years, then let's start the rebuild from a position of greater strength. And I think when you look at the reports of Emery's contract, that it's a 2-year with an option for a third, and that seems to line up almost exactly with the recruitment strategy, which is really geared on the next 2 years. And so I think Emery's probably got get back into the Champions League ASAP, but you won't be sacked necessarily if you don't get there next summer. I think it's maybe a one-strike basis, and that seems to be what the recruitment is geared around. It's geared around the next 12 to 24 months, and then in 24 months, one way or another, we will hit the reset button, and hopefully we will do that from a position of greater strength than what we're in now.
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, and that makes more sense than really any other defensive I've heard. And ironically, I actually think Lichtsteiner is a more sensible signing than maybe Socrates, and I'll maybe just expand on that really quickly at the end. But Clive, I mean, do you think these signings make sense? Are you confused by them at all, or do you think they're the right move? How have you reacted to this news?
I'm not confused. To add on top of Tim's point, I absolutely agree that it's all about positioning for the club. It's really key we don't turn into what Liverpool were a few years ago, 5, 6, 7 years out of the Champions League, wherever it was, or brief hiatus, then out again. We really, really need to get back into the top 4. So I sort of predict a top and tail type, I call it hiring strategy, but obviously transfer strategy. The top end to get some solidity and experience. And so those players that we're buying make sense, given the amount of experience we have lost. But I also see more of a youth at the bottom end. And I think we're going to be nurturing players, some gems, in the sort of 19 age, the 22-year-old centre-back type range, 21-year-old centre-back type range. And I think we're going to use these experienced players to get us positioned, give those younger players a year or so to develop into the 22, 23-year-olds that are shining gems. And then, as Tim alluded to, hit the reset button. Now we're back in the Champions League and say, okay, now we can buy the ready-made 26-year-olds. Suddenly then you're bringing your age profile down. You're looking at 26-year-olds to now go with the young gems that are proving themselves. Then you build a squad value up very quickly, because you're in that sort of age range that looks like you've got a very, very deep squad with lots of young players. And if you add to the young players that we have in the club who are homegrown, I think that's when we're going to really see what we're doing. It's going to be in the next 2 to 3 years rather than this year. So this year is about stabilising, repositioning, make us competitive, top 4. Stay in the top 4 for next season, then bang, reset, we go from there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's interesting because, Paul, like for me, I look at the squad as it is composed now, and whether I agree with how it is composed now, we have to make the most of the squad we have. And since the squad we have, and I've touched on this in previous podcasts, we all have, is more win now oriented than maybe you'd expect given our circumstances, we kind of have to try to see that out to its most logical conclusion, right? And so is that really what's going on here? Fill immediate needs in the squad with experienced players who can step into an already experienced team and get us back into that top 4. Paul.
Oh, Paul.
Yep.
I think so. I think I don't. It's so messy, right? We need different kinds of players all over the pitch to be brought in. We need different age profiles matching against. It's a complicated mess, and I'm glad we have Sven and Raul. I think your analysis of it is pretty good. I'm happy to live with that. I think the two boys will be super pumped that we are now in a structure where we make decisions quickly, we move forward, we get our targets. I mean, we basically kind of pretty much got everybody we've gone after. Pulled off complicated deals like Alexis. I mean, none of us thought we were going to get Alexis for basically Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan at the start. If we'd heard that, and we kind of did, we would have poo-pooed it, as they say in England, on January 1st, and by January 31st it was done. So they're going to have a great time, because this is a horrible fucking tangle ball mess of ages, profiles, types of players, a new coach needing different styles. So, the piece that I don't have any particular view as to what we're going to do. I'm going to enjoy sitting back and letting see if Sven and Raul can yank the levers without being held back, without a slow decision maker who likes to kick the tires time and time again. Go in, make choice. Emery, the terrible thing about Arsene was he thought he would always have 5 years to move the club on, which is great, and it's terrible. And towards the end, it was not so good. Unai Emery knows he has 12 months, 24 months. He probably thinks he has 12 months because of how fans at other clubs are. I think unless he's terrible, he's going to get 24 months from our fans, even if it gets occasionally a little less comfortable. So he's going to have 2 years, but that's all. So he's going to want to make quick decisions, and I think it all lines up. He's going to want to get the help of Sven and Raul. He's going to take their opportunities, and he's going to want to move quick, and he's going to want, unlike other years where there was a reluctance to bring players in in the summer and spend too much, he's going to be like, I don't care what they fucking cost. Here's what I need this summer to make this team work, to put my identity on it, to change things up. So I don't really care. I want to sit back and see them work through the problem.
Yeah, I mean, that is a long way to go to get to I don't care, but I think you said a lot of good stuff in between. Look,
Thanks.
I think the reason I think Lichtsteiner's a good addition is it's a free way on a 1-year deal to get a backup to Bellerin, and we desperately need it, so that he can get some rotational options. So he can play in the group stages of the Europa League and play in the Carabao Cup, and Bellerin can get a rest, maybe play in some home games against promoted sides, things like that. The Socrates thing worries me a little more, only because he's going to be 30 in a minute. He is coming off, from people that observed the Bundesliga, a poor season at a chaotic Dortmund. I acknowledge that. But Socrates isn't being purchased to be a depth option, a backup rotational option. We need starting center backs immediately. Koscielny is probably not going to play next season. Mertesacker's gone. Mustafi may be gone, but at a minimum is shaky. And the rest of it is kids, essentially. I mean, I'm classing Holding, Chambers, and Mavropanos as kids. So Socrates isn't being bought to play occasionally. He's being bought to anchor the center of our defense, coming off a very poor season and at 30 years old. So that worries me. It worries me that it's an area of supreme need, and we may be making a very economical, parsimonious choice with that need. Now, we may bring in yet another center back who is of a higher profile, to partner him, and then that would change things. So that's the only reason the Socrates thing worries me a little bit. There are a lot of people killing Mislintat and killing the team and saying these guys should be finding the next young stars and the next young players with big upside. But I think, as all of you guys have pointed out, this is a squad that is constructed to sort of be good right now or not at all, and so you might as well lean into that because you're already 3/4 of the way there. I mean, Aubameyang...
But also, Elliot, and I think we chatted about this on Twitter, these are the kinds of deals that you can do quickly at the start of the summer, so you can then work out, go and get your diamond eye, super talented players.
There's already a guy we're linked to...
Complex.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's already a guy we're linked to from, is it Sampdoria? A central midfielder who has been described sort of as a Santi Cazorla type, and he's highly regarded, and I think he's 22, and that's very exciting. That's the kind of thing I'd love to see us do. So we'll see. Look, I think we covered a lot of ground here, and it's a good stopping point. Obviously, if any big transfers other than the ones we just discussed happen, we'll come back and talk about it. If anything happens of interest Arsenal-wise, we'll come back and talk about it. We might take a little bit of a hiatus, though, during the World Cup, just to recharge our respective batteries. A lot of good things planned for next season, and some ideas we're working on. We did cross over the 1 million listener or listen mark over the last couple episodes or so, and so I just want to take another opportunity to say,
unfortunately, he panned us and thought we were terrible, but
yeah, you
can't guarantee what that
millionth listener didn't love us, but the rest of you, all kidding aside, genuinely appreciate the fact that you have stuck with us, have listened to us, have gone through what was a tumultuous season with us, and we can all band together and look forward to a very exciting new season. I think getting the chance to discuss a new manager, players like Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan being integrated, new guys coming in, new things to debate. It'll be really exciting, and we hope to see you there. So Tim's on Twitter at Stilberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure, as always.
You can find him also on the web at iHeartShaka.com. Paul is on Twitter at PoznanInMyPants. Thanks, Poz.
Thank you.
Yep, there we go. And Clive is on Twitter at ClivePAFC. You can also find him at a pitch near you coaching the future stars of tomorrow. Thanks, Clive.
Under 18s now. Thank you very much.
Very, very good. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. You can find me, I'm pretty much a vagrant. You probably find me under a bridge, roaming around your town somewhere, bag of something in a brown paper bag, drinking it, hoping for life to turn around for me. When will it work out for him? In any event, we'll be back when the next exciting Arsenal things happen. I hope you have a wonderful summer, a wonderful World Cup, and when we make that next huge exciting signing, we'll be back to discuss it. Thanks, everyone.